Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to you, Nataraj. Welcome.
Thank you, Katie.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. I'm hoping everyone had a nice and lovely break. Actually, wherever in the world, I had dinner. Nataraj, probably you had lunch.
Yeah,
It's good to have you here, and for everyone else who is joining us here for the last part of our 2 day long conference. It was our 15th annual Biopharma and MedTech PPM conference, and we're hoping it was the last virtual one, really, and we're hoping to see you all in person next year. Everything is in planning. Come and join us. Black Friday deals are in your inboxes, hopefully, so go and check them out. And we're back, as I said, with Nataraj Dasgupta. He's the VP, Vice President of Analytics for RX Data Science. And Nataraj was very kind and he accepted our invitations to come and join us here for the last part of the conference of today with his biopharma case study on recent advances using artificial intelligence and machine learning. I'm very excited. This is going to be very different, technical. You're going to love it. I'm going to love it. I'm very excited. So, without further ado, Nataraj, I'm going to give you my word. And everyone, enjoy. Keep the comments coming. We will answer them towards the end of Nataraj's session. Thank you so much, everyone.
yeah. Thank you for that introduction, Katie. So, yeah, I'll try to make it quick. I know it's towards the end of the day over there too. So, what I'm going to cover is, I guess, it's slightly technical. It speaks to some of the more recent advances in analytics in the real-world evidence space, and more than a case study, it's a general overview of what's happening in RWE. So, without further ado, I'm going to get started. I have a starting introduction, and then I'm going to move through two main sections. One is about the data management, the second is more towards the analytics part. So, firstly, RX Data Science, the firm I'm with, we were founded in 2016 by ex-pharma executives, and we had headquarters in NC, New York, and London and Singapore. At that time in 2017, we had 30 employees and about two clients. So fast forward 2020, last year, we had by then we had grown to about 100 full-time employees and 24 by 7 operations. And lastly, this year, we got acquired by Syneos Health. So some of the slides might look like the same branding that you have at Syneos, but that's because we just got acquired. And Yeah, so in terms of Syneos, it's one of the top three CROs, top one CCO. I won't go into too much of these, but basically what these slides are talking to is that we are quite deeply embedded in the world of analytics, in the world of RWE analytics. So at various stages. So firstly, an overview of what advanced analytics means for RWE. Now, one of the questions that I had been kind of asking even myself about until about a couple of years ago is there has been a sudden increase in the interest in RWE, and part of the reason, I guess, one of the major reasons, has been the fact that the FDA made an announcement that RWE studies could be included, made a formal decision that RWE studies could be included as part of new drug applications or IND submissions. And that's a pretty significant change because earlier, these RWE studies were limited to post-marketing efficacy and those sorts of topics, whereas when you can use observational data to supplement the new drug applications, you have a host of new possibilities. Firstly, of course, this represents a modernization of the FDA approach to NDAs, faster approvals, time to market, accelerated confirmation of product efficacy. Basically, instead of doing a full-fledged randomized clinical trial, which could take years, you can supplement that or make that stronger with observational data like longitudinal patient records, which everyone all the major pharmaceutical healthcare firms work with. So the left side of the screen is actually the formal submission form that you need to fill out when you include RWE studies in NDA submissions. So as far as, I've tried to simplify this overall topic, so there's essentially three levels or three categories that we can speak to when it comes to RWE analytics. Firstly, there's the data management platform. Now, as I said, this talk is going to be slightly technical, so please bear with me. That is the core, subject of this discussion. So first is the data management platform. Now, this becomes important because when you're dealing with RWE, you're dealing with very large volume data sets. So it becomes essential to have the right type of platform to query your proven market scan, your IQVIA lab data, your Flatiron data, your Komodo data, whatever data sets you're working with. The second part in RW analytics is the statistical data analytics. So that's more epidemiology, clinical, commercial focused statistical analysis that everyone has been doing for many, many years. And the third part is the AI and machine learning aspect. So in the AI and machine learning aspect, today you have newer methodologies such as deep learning, CNN, convolution neural networks, and more generally, machine learning algorithms being applied to EHR data. And that has spanned a lot of different use cases. I think you'll mostly see it in the clinical space, but it's slowly also developing in terms of the EHR, longitudinal EHR records. So in this section, I'm going to speak to some of the RWE data management and cloud analytics aspects. So firstly, this is actually one of the slides we had when we started our startup 5 years ago. So the question that we posed was, data management takes 80% of the effort of the entire life cycle, the end-to-end life cycle of an RW analysis, and then you spend like 20% of the time doing the actual analysis work once the data has been loaded onto the platform and that whole thing has happened. So you're spending a lot of time in the data management, infrastructure management, software management, administration, and then a part of that overall thing in RWE research. And one of the questions we posed was, what if we could switch this? What if we could make the continuum go from 80% data management to 20% data management, 80% analysis? That's a mandate we started with, and this is an atypical RWE, or more generally, analytics setup in any organization. And at RX Data Science, one of the things we wanted to look at was, can we simplify it? And we literally, had it down to a very simple platform that could do all the data management for all our different RWE data sets. Now, the reason having a capable data management platform is important is that, if you look at this, this is a continuum of data from, as it starts from the manufacturer all the way to the individual receiving a prescription at a pharmacy. So medical claims, EMR, these are the two areas where we encounter RWE, real world evidence, real world data, and from which you're going to get real world evidence. Now, that's a huge volume of data. And I have this sort of explains why you need capable, or why you need more high performance kind of systems in order to do data management for RWE. So generally, before you had large scale data sets, you could quite easily, you didn't really need to do too much. You could just use simple databases like RDBMS systems. But what has happened in recent days is that we have become very enmeshed in temporal analysis. So for instance, we are looking at what happened to the patient, n months before a certain date of event. So were they on different drugs? Did they have any types of diagnosis? And we're also looking at follow-up periods. So there's a huge temporal aspect to this data. When we have, when you're working with typical EHR data sets, you're going to have long tables like this, which now you need to sort of flip into a white table where you're going to have, and for each patient, the index event, which is the event from which you're tracking the patient horizontally, backwards or forwards, can be different. So an index event could be the first date of diagnosis with, let's say, fever, and that is going to be different for each patient. This is challenging because, and this is just the number of records and number of unique patients in one of the databases we are working with. The data set has 40 billion rows, 225 million unique patient lives, and each of them have a unique cohort entry date or CED. So as you can imagine, on the left side, you have this 40 billion row table, and you are transposing it on a per patient basis and tracking each patient longitudinally through different time points. Now, what has happened is, thanks to the cloud, though, we have certain tools at our disposal today, which has made this kind of analysis much simpler than it once was. I typically split it into 3 levels of analysis. One is more of the R&D types. The R&D types is where you're doing hands-on machine learning neural networks, like from first principles, and that's very prevalent in drug development, scientific computing, and so on. Then you have cloud machine learning platforms, and then you have cloud software as a service platforms. And this is, I think the third part is the important one, which is the cloud software as a service. So as you see in this slide, this is a patient engagement platform where you haven't had to really build any of these complex architectures in-house. What the organization has done is essentially use components from AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, to build the entire platform end to end without investing in any in-house technologies. So it basically goes to show that you can analyze these records, you can do pretty complex analytics with just the resources that you can get on the web via the cloud. And this is a sort of a slide that gives you different tools that are available, different products that are available in AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google for areas like robotic process automation. So RPA, you might have heard a lot about AI automation these days, computer vision, machine learning, NLP, virtual agents, recommendations, and demand forecasting. So in essence, you could be building some of these really complex architectures just with off-the-shelf products. This is a technical architecture which I wouldn't really go into, but I just want to show a few applications that that we had developed. One was a real-time RWE data explorer. This was going against Proven Market Scan, about 20 billion records, query APIs using R, SAS, Python, and common data models. So basically, things like the ones that I've just shown, these sorts of use cases can be done pretty easily. Well, not easily, but they can be done by using any of these off-the-shelf AWS, Google Cloud, Azure products. I won't go into those, but okay. So this part talks to, so now let's see, if you have this data management platform, everything set up, there's also need to have an agile operational framework. So it's not just enough to have the technology in place, but also have an end-to-end, we talk a lot about agile software development lifecycle, but we also need to have an agile operational lifecycle. And this is something that we practice internally. It essentially has 3 levels or 4 levels of, in the pipeline, there are 4 different levels that we traverse through. So the first, you have the RWRCT study, and that's where you're defining your inclusion-exclusion criteria and so on. Once that's done, that group then moves the requirements over to our data engineering team, where the data engineer basically takes the data set that's going to be required for the RWE study and does feature engineering, creates new columns, does all the data curation. Once that's done, it moves on to the statistical analysis part, where we're doing AI models, explainable AI, and so on. fourth, the business insights. So once these two groups have completed their work, there's a fourth team, and this is an interesting one, where they're essentially comprised of business liaisons who's going to take the results from the statistical analysis group and pass that information back to the business teams or the groups that's running the brand teams, let's say, in a commercial research. So this cycle continues until we have a product until we have the results of the RW study that's fully accepted by the business team, and goes through several different iterations. It's a new emerging field. It's also called agile data science. It's sort of applying the same agile concepts in the operational workflow of an organization in analytics, in addition to the software development lifecycle. So in this section, I have some use cases. I've spoken quite a bit about the data management, and I'm sorry, I'm going through this quite fast because I have quite a few different examples that I do want to show in terms of the AI and ML aspect and the statistical data analysis aspect. So I have a couple of, there are many different use cases these days, but interestingly, even in commercial, we have started using RWE datasets, for instance, for physician matching. Can we link physician and patient records across different datasets? So, you're a patient, you have a certain condition, and you want to work with a certain kind of physician maybe. And so using RWE records, you can match those patients to the physician. Market mix modeling, so the kind of promotional activities you can do to increase your brand sales. Territory alignment, similarity scoring, patient-doctor matching, rare disease patient finders. This is an important one. So basically, for rare diseases, you can use machine learning to find those patients from EHR databases. In terms of, and there are many, many others, treatment pathways, medication non-adherence, spread of diseases, and so on. What we have also started seeing is that in the different stages of a clinical trial, you can have different AI applications of AI in the different stages in various aspects. So, for instance, in the study design phase, you can have a machine learning assisted protocol design, inclusion exclusion criteria that's defined using machine learning. So you try to narrow down the right set of IE criteria that's going to get you more patients, patient enrollment, dynamic engagement planning, and so on. The part that we had done traditionally in the past is the RWD statistical analysis part, which is mainly to do with survival analysis, risk ratio, hazard ratio, and so on. These are some applications that we had developed, but I won't go into them right now. I'll go straight to some of the topics that I think are more prevalent, that would be more interesting. So this is one example. This is on the advanced AI machine learning side. So I just spoke about finding a patient. Just like that, you can also try to diagnose a condition before it happens using EHR records. So typically, this has been done using, so basically you have a set of patients and you want to know in the next 4 months, is the patient going to have, a certain kind of, it's going to have a certain type of diagnosis. So generally, we had used longitudinal EHR records, and you build models using diagnosis code, procedure codes, and prescription information. But the issue we used to have was it couldn't capture long-term dependencies because we're using NLP models, and it couldn't really go. It doesn't really capture the temporal aspect when we were using general purpose machine learning. So in more recent days, and this is a bit more advanced, we have started seeing some universities or academic circles start to apply NLP concepts on EHR data sets. The reason this is helpful is that getting medical notes, so the doctor notes, can be difficult for pharmaceutical organizations due to privacy regulations. But everybody has EHR data, RWE EHR data. So using concepts in NLP, we can apply the same methodologies on longitudinal data that is prevalent to do the same type of diagnosis work that were limited to EMR. So essentially what happens is that you take each event or each diagnosis of each of those patients and treat those as words. So each diagnosis becomes a word, each visit a sentence, and the patient's entire medical history is the document. And that it does capture long-term dependencies because of the type of model we use. It's something called it's a bidirectional model, and especially it captures the element of age, which is a key risk factor. There's another topic, that has also become very prevalent. It's called explainable AI, and explainable AI is about how we can explain the outcome of these models. So it's not just accepting the machine learning results as is. So the machine learning algorithm makes certain prediction, and a lot of there have been a lot of discussions that these are black box models. But what explainable AI does is that it doesn't only give you the prediction; it actually tells you why it made that prediction. So it's going to tell you that this patient is going to have this particular outcome because historically there were 20 other patients like this patient, and they had these comorbidities, and they developed the same outcome. So it's not really just just a black box any longer. So and there are many other things going on, and this was just sort of synopsis. And this slide is just a synopsis of some of the changes that we are seeing in a real-time cohort exploration, optimization-based eligibility criteria, and so on. So explainable AI already mentioned. So causal inference. These topics might seem a bit disjointed, but I've tried my best to try and capture some of the main themes as succinctly as possible. So the second concept after explainable AI is an area called causal inference. And causal inference, you may have worked with products like Aetion. And essentially what we are trying to do here is we create cohorts, so groups of patients who could look very similar to patients in a randomized clinical trial. And using what you call propensity score matched cohorts and inverse probability treatment weighting, IPTW, you create a cohort using your EHR RWE dataset, and you apply the inclusion-exclusion criteria, and you compare the hazard ratio. So you're going to see, what was the mortality for a set of patients who have the same characteristics as a set of patients who were there in a randomized clinical trial. Now, RCTs are very expensive, they're very time-consuming, so it isn't hard to see how quickly this becomes a very powerful method to find answers that earlier you were only deriving primarily through very time-consuming RCTs. The third topic here is NLP for clinical records. So free text contains information on symptoms, test results, diagnosis that aren't present in structured notes. And so NLP, or as it is called, is also a very popular methodology in machine learning to query clinical records and build predictive models. So you can do, this is basically comparing free text, that is natural language processing, where a text on which you applied NLP, and it's comparing the specificity and sensitivity. So basically the results, comparing that with coded results, so from structured data. And what you find here is that a lot of times, in most of the cases, the results are comparable or they exceed what you can find from structured EHR data sets. The fourth concept is federated learning. Federated learning is about a lot of hospitals, a number of hospitals, they want to share the data, but you can't because there are privacy implications. So with federated learning, what's happening these days is each hospital can have its own set of records and own set of data. And what you do is you create the machine learning model and you send the model, just the model, to these institutions where they get processed, and the results are then sent back to you. And you see there are many studies online, but in this one, federated learning of EHR improves mortality prediction in COVID-19. So, and this was done by Mount Sinai. There's also, this is the fifth topic, it's called distributed over the edge learning. This is about using mobile devices or IoTs to do these sorts of neural network processing. So everyone has mobile devices. So instead of trying to do computations at scale in these large institutions, can you still get to keep your own personal health records, but the machine learning model is sent to the device, and where it gets computed, where the results get computed, and just the aggregate information is then sent back to a central repository. Sixth, in terms of RW visualization, there's quite a bit of work going on in that space too. Basically, how we can represent the IE criteria visually in order to sort of work towards what's called a START RWV template. There are many applications that we had developed around these sorts of topics. Again, I won't go into any of them, but things like Visual Explorer of cohorts, cohort builders, patient journey, dynamic treatment pathways, and so on. So there's quite a few things that I covered, and sorry, I think I went through them quite fast, but there's just so much happening. It's hard to sort of cover everything in one session. But if you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I'd be happy to discuss further.
Nataraj, I'm speechless. As a non-PPM professional, I tried to follow pretty hard, but it was very wonderful, very informative, and such a different keynote to be added to the entire conference. This was very incredible. And we do actually have a question from Roseanne. She asks, how do you address the more complicated patient cases where the AI ML may get it wrong because there are factors with the patient the algorithm isn't taking into account? So please, if you can answer this one.
Yeah, sure. So yes, I mean, none of these results are completely foolproof. Now, one thing to keep in mind is we are not making predictions here at an individual level. We are making predictions more so at an aggregate level. When it comes to individual level predictions, that's a lot more sensitive topic where you're actually going to the physician and getting diagnosis done. But at an aggregate level, there are ways of benchmarking. So you back test your algorithm, see how well it performs with old historical data, and then you can give a level of confidence that what I'm predicting here will have this accuracy. So I mean, it's a very good question, but one thing to keep in mind is we don't make predictions at individual levels typically. I mean, not at least in an RWE study context.
Thank you. Hopefully they kind of covered and answered your question, Roseanne. Thank you for that. It was interesting. If I can ask quickly, Natar, this was quite a complex keynote, as you said a few times. It was quite hard, and you had to kind of move quickly. Could people reach you maybe on our PPM Workout platform or anywhere else? Where, if they would like to find you, where can they?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn, or I can send my email address as well. These are deep and pretty complicated topics, and I kind of struggled to think, how I can make it simple. So yeah, I'm a bit concerned about, the technicality aspect, but yeah, you can reach me by LinkedIn or via email. Yeah.
Perfect. I mean, if it's going to get complicated and people, didn't understand, they're probably going to write me an email. So I'm going to get back to you.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, as Natar said, please feel free to connect with him, or connect with me, and I might get you in touch, because as Natar said a few times, it was quite a harder topic to follow. And I'm saying this as a very non-PPM professional, and if Natar is saying this as well, I'm kind of offering a help if you'd like to get in touch. And Roseanne says, thank you for answering. So hopefully that kind of covered it. And Nataraj, thank you again so very much. It was incredible. I really appreciate you coming on here and joining us for our last day of the conference. And please stay tuned for the rest of the event and tell us how you like it all.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you, Katie.
Thank
And
you. It was a pleasure.
thanks. Yeah.